at 5.
Just 1 month ago, Nichol Olson and her two daughters, 16-year-old Alexa and 10-year-old London, were found shot to death in their Texas home, which she shared with her boyfriend, Charlie Wheeler. The brutal killings were originally determined to be a murder-suicide, but now investigators are calling that into question. Joining me now with our true crime expert panel, Melissa Moore, Derek Levasseur, and Anasiga Nicolazzi. As a parent, it is hard for me to imagine how someone could commit such a crime against their own children. I don't understand it, don't get it. Most of us probably don't. Melissa, police initially ruled Nichol's death as a suicide. So what do we know about her, and what do people who know her think about that belief that she killed herself?
Well, it's the belief of the people who know her best is what brought this to the attention, to put a spotlight on it, to make sure that she gets the proper evaluation for this case. So what we do know about her, she's 38. She has 3 children, actually. So the 2 girls that were with her were murdered. Her son is college age. She was married before, and she's a hairstylist.
And what are they saying about the possibility she killed herself? Her friends, relatives, anyone?
They don't believe it at all, especially like she was such a devoted mom, they said. They also said that her daughter was going to audition for America's Got Talent. So, yeah, just the next day, the day that they found her body is the day she was going to audition. Yeah.
And the relationship with Charlie, any feedback on that?
So they had a fight the night before, because I wondered, why is he not staying the night in the house? Why is he just happened to be gone that night that they were murdered? So they had a fight, and he stayed in a relative's place, and he wasn't there until the morning.
So the Bexar County medical examiner has ruled that Nichol shot herself and that her daughters were murdered in a possible murder-suicide. The local sheriff has said that they are continuing the investigation, and now the FBI is involved. Anasiga, as a prosecutor, what prompts the police department to call in the FBI?
The average murder case, they don't come in. FBI is brought in primarily, number one, resources, or when local law enforcement, although very capable of solving it on their own, when they are looking for any help possible, whether it is because time is of the essence in the case of a kidnapping. Here in a case where you're looking at, is this a murder-suicide, it is likely that the sheriff called for their assistance, because that is what happened. He called them in to ask for their help. Technological assistance. They have such vast resources. They have such expertise and skill that if they can help this police department determine whether in fact Nichol Olson killed her 2 daughters and then took her own life, or in fact it was made to look that way, they are willing to take that help in any way they can.
Derek, so Nichole's boyfriend, Charlie, he's been named a person of interest, not a suspect. 2 different things. Do you think that might change?
I mean, it could. Right now, the police are exploring all scenarios, and as you pointed out, the forensic pathologist has ruled Nichol's death a suicide, which is significant. But they're not just going to stop there. They're going to do their due diligence. They're going to recreate the scene. They're going to use blood spatter analysis, gunshot residue testing, and ballistic trajectory testing, probably through the FBI, to recreate the scene to determine if the crime scene, the way it was laid out, is indicative of those results. If it is, I believe they will rule it a murder-suicide. If it's not, then Mr. Wheeler has some serious questions to answer.
You know, something I think might be interesting to people is they hear, well, wait a second, the medical examiner already said this is a murder-suicide. Why isn't this case closed? How the medical examiner, as you know, Dr. Eyes, they use actually what they see during the examination, the autopsy, the body, plus the basic information they get at the time from law enforcement. However, things develop. You know, I've had cases myself that years later you find out that an individual has been poisoning people, so they've had to go back and look, and sure enough, a case that they thought was natural causes ended up being a murder case. So it is as information is gleaned and develops that sometimes it doesn't mean the medical examiner didn't do a thorough job. They're working with what they see and what they have, and sometimes that can change.
Yeah, I've done enough autopsies to know that if the gun is close to your head and leaves residue and the exit site's the right size, then you know the gun was close to the head. You don't know if she pulled the trigger when the gun was close to her head. And I'm sure there's much more sophisticated analyses than I'm articulating that would help.
What's interesting as well is she didn't leave a suicide note, and she never mentioned suicide or had suicidal thoughts. So I find that interesting.
And that's where investigators come in, because now they're going to look for a motive. What would her motive be to do what she did to her daughters? And or what would Wheeler's motive be to try to make this look like a murder-suicide? That's what investigators are for. They're looking beyond the facts and circumstances. They're going to dive into their past and see what could have led to this.
Also, I find it interesting that they found the bodies on the 2nd story. So it's you know, rich people have, this is $1 million house, rich people have alarms and everything. So that kind of leads towards the suicide part, that they were found on the second story. So if there was an intruder, the alarms would go off, and they would be probably, there'd be defensive wounds, or there'd be wounds down, there'd be bodies maybe on the main floor. So that,
Or somebody that knew the house and knew the system.
yeah.
Right, up next, what is Nicole's boyfriend, Charlie Wheeler, saying now? Stay with us. I'm back with my crime panel, discussing the alleged mother-daughter murder-suicide making headlines. So we reached out to Charlie Wheeler's attorney and did not hear back in time for this taping, but the Associated Press reported that his attorney has made the following comments on his behalf. What we would ask is that people not jump to conclusions, that they not demonize this young man who does not deserve it, that they let the professionals do their jobs and complete this investigation and respect the privacy of presumptively innocent people and of Charlie Wheeler, who did not commit a crime here. So the manner in which these three were killed is a little bizarre. Second floor being examples. Anasika, what does that tell you as a prosecutor?
So all three were shot. The mother, Nicole, and one of her daughters, the oldest, had one gunshot wound to the head. Their youngest had 2 gunshot wounds. So forensics is going to be extremely important here. They did test Nicole Olsen's fingers, her hands, for gunshot residue. Police have not given us those findings yet. So it's really going to determine, does this make sense? As you already noted, Dr. Oz, is it going to be the trajectory, the path this bullet takes? Is that someone that a way that you'd expect someone to be able to put a gun to their own head, or is it more likely that someone from the outside is pointing that weapon? While it seems very simple, people that are committing crimes don't always think of these things. They sometimes think, oh wait, if I put the gun right next to her, it'll look like a suicide. But when people that have more skills in these areas look at it, they can easily figure that out. At the same time, as Derek, I want our law enforcement to be very mindful and skeptical of ruling this anything more than it looked, because that's important to everyone, and certainly Charlie Wheeler in this case. They need to determine, based on the forensics, based on everything around, the gun is there, as also Melissa pointed out, what was going on in her life, and that is how they're going to determine, was this in fact a crime by a mother or by someone else against all three?
So what happens next in this case, very specifically?
Very specifically, there's going to be more on the part of law enforcement trying to connect the dots to see if they fit. Is the medical examiner's initial assessment correct? Case closed, albeit very tragic, or is this a murder investigation?
All right, thanks to my panel. I appreciate it. As always, great insights. Be sure to look for Anasika and Derek on investigation.